We continue with ASCAC's Western Region 2024 Conference with a message from our ancestors who dedicated themselves to put us on a trajectory of higher consciousness, instructing us to not let our religious and other constructed ideologies and differences divide us. As we begin this virtual conference, let all of our spirits unite as one. Yes, let all of our spirits unite as one. Now, let us listen to the voices of some of our ancestors, guiding us to move forward in our divine purpose, to know thyself, to live ma'at, to be self-determined, kujichagulia, and to create our reality in our own image.
I assure you that it is always a very special pleasure and honor for me to have an opportunity to address this family, to be a part of an organization that enjoys the spiritual inspiration of Doc Ben, of Dr. John Henry Clark, of the different study groups that are the foundation now for ASCAC. My colleagues on the board of directors, the members of this organization, friends of this organization, African people in general. Absolutely nothing that you can do as a family without having control of the socialization process of your members. And when that breaks down, then you're vulnerable. You die. Literally, it's a matter of life and death. So I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about it in terms of what we did before white people start messing with us. To talk about indigenous African socialization. And the reason for that is that there is nobody, no people anywhere on the planet that has a better grasp of how to raise babies and how to transform children into adults and adults into spiritual people ready to be ancestors. There's nobody who knows how to do that better than African people. And of course, that's why that became a target of those who want to destroy us, who have wanted to destroy us, who still want to destroy us. That agenda has never changed. You may think slavery began in the Western Hemisphere in 1492, slightly earlier than that, with the Portuguese in Africa, and if you go over into East Africa, even earlier. And maybe even some people say there was a little bit of slavery at all times. I'm not sure about that. Certainly not chattel slavery the way we understand it. But you may say that we went through that and the agenda changed. No, it didn't. You may say that colonization started when the Europeans got together in 1885, 1884 in Berlin, at the Berlin Conference, divided Africa among themselves without the permission of African people. And that ran out in the 50s. You might say that, and that the agenda had changed when colonization ended because Africans took over governments as leaders of government, presidents, and so forth. It didn't end there. Colonization didn't end there. Africa is still colonized at the moment. There's not a free African country in the world. There are a lot of us in political positions, but there's no African country where they own their monetary system and banking system. There's no African country where they even control their military. So the things that it takes, the fundamental things that it takes to make nation states, if there are any, are still things that are currently interrupted by colonizers and slavers. So slavery continues, colonization continues, segregation continues. Some people thought that when South Africa, apartheid fell, that it actually fell. It didn't. The agenda has never changed. The agenda changes clothes. It has different forms, and one of the most devastating forms is the persistent attempt to make sure that Africans never again control the socialization process of their children and of themselves. Slavery was war, a war against African culture, especially against the structure of the family. There are people now that don't know what slavery was. They think it was people put on ships and brought here to work. Well, yeah, it was that. That's the first layer. But there's another layer. It was war on who the African was. It was war on the structure that produced the who. So people who dominate and control must destroy structure and purpose. They must destroy identity and direction.
When religion is going to make children and parents and other loved ones part because of their obligation, then is that helping you? Oh no, I can't see that. I can't see why it make a difference if a black sister comes up, an African sister, and she is Jewish, she is Muslim, she is Christian, she is Buddhist. It don't make a difference to me. That got nothing to do with I'm going to marry her or go with her. If she is a good woman, that is the criteria, not how she prays. And then does it make a difference if I got a Magen David or I got a crescent or I got a cross, but I didn't support my child? And I'm making oodles and noodles of money, but I got all these things, and I tell you, man, I'm a Christian. I'm a Muslim, brother. I follow Malcolm. And what big deal? And you don't give your son, your daughter, a piece of bone. No, it is about time that we understand that most of us are Christians because the slave master was a Christian. Most of us are Muslim because the Arab slave master was a Muslim. Most of us are members of the Church of England because we're from the Caribbean under the British colony. Or we are French because we were born in New Orleans or other parts of Louisiana or Guadeloupe or so forth. We had nothing to do with being rational about it. Have nothing to do with our interests. Because if it were our interest in terms of Christianity, then we would not belong to the church because we don't see a black Jesus in the Bible. There's so many things in which we have to look in all of them. There are the differences. We can see them. There is no doubt where religion started. It didn't start. If we go back in Islam, Islam doesn't have an existence, the Arab doesn't have an existence without an African woman. It is out of an African woman that Ishmael came.
To all of those African people who endured the horrors of captivity and enslavement, determined to survive so that we all can be here today to complete the work that the great creator of the universe gave us the cosmic assignment to perform in our time, to bring justice and peace to this planet and to the universe. We need to take note that the Creator made us as black people the parent people of all of the people on this planet, the mothers and fathers of all of the people, including the white-skinned albino mutants that are the genetic recessive mutations from the black norm. And by crossing the two, the white albino mutant and the black, it produces all of the shades and shades of black people that make up the entire human family that we see on the planet today. But in the great flow of cosmic time, because we as the black parent people, check this, rejected and pushed out of the African homeland the white-skinned mutants, chasing them and sending them northward to the area of the world that is now called Europe. They became the foster children of wolves, as coded in the origin myths of Western civilization as Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. In the great passage of time, their numbers increased, and they multiplied, becoming what we now see as the white race. They, just as our present-day black abandoned children, began to wage war against us for not giving them their birthright of in-depth care. What we now refer to as the enslavement was the return of the abandoned mutants to Africa, forcing us as black people to now give them total care without pay, known as slavery, brutally beating us and killing us, and then in their ongoing evolved system of injustice, which we now understand to be the system of racism, white supremacy, the local, national, global system that is necessary not only as payback, but most importantly, to now prevent white genetic annihilation and to ensure white genetic survival on planet Earth. We are now able to see that it is racism, white supremacy as a total system structure that we are dealing with as it attacks our lives in total war through all of the areas of people activity simultaneously: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, controlling all patterns of perception, logic, thought, speech, action, and emotional response. All behaviors being consciously and subconsciously orchestrated for the genetic survival of the tiny global white minority population on a planet with an overwhelming majority of non-white people, the black, brown, red, and yellow peoples of planet Earth, all of whom are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetic recessive white-skinned people. Neely Fuller Jr., the first to identify the system structure of racism, white supremacy, has said the following, which I believe is the second most important statement of the 20th century, following the wisdom and truth of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. Mr. Fuller stated, quote, "If you do not understand white supremacy racism, what it is and exactly how it works, everything else that you think you understand will only confuse you." Racism, white supremacy, is the genetic survival system for the tiny minority population on the planet. It is therefore not logical nor sensible for anyone to think that they would cease their genetic struggle to survive. Neither love nor money will change this imperative. Neither begging, singing, or praying will change this, their course of action, by any and all means necessary. Stated another way, we boarded the Integration Assimilation Train Express in the racism white supremacy train station, getting on board with racially mixed toilets and drinking fountains, club car and sleeping car and dining car accommodations. We sat back and relaxed, knowing that we were on the way to the promised land, fried chicken in hand.
We do need to say a few words, because we've come, we've celebrated, we've had a great, great time. I mean, you lifted my spirits, my heart, my everything, as the kids would say. You made me feel good about myself. You made me look at the promise instead of the tragedies that we always hear about our people. That there's promise in this family, that we can give our people hope and aspirations, that children can learn, that old people will be recognized, that they're not just old, but they're wiser and worthy of recognition. And so we look at our officers. Some of them we haven't seen since last year. We tried to talk to everyone on the conference call thing, but even the conference call isn't the same like seeing a face. It's not the same like running into Ed Watson in Brazil somewhere. Like, we know those people over there. So it's been a good conference, but we can't stop now. We kind of like Harriet Tubman, we got to keep on moving. I get so angry, I don't even gonna mention when I hear Hillary say, keep moving, you ain't I said, that's us. That's our task, to rescue our own ancestors, you know what I mean? But since she said it, let's use it. I'll tell you why, because we're gonna get some people in the run. We're gonna get some people, because they haven't heard it before. It's kind of like when it takes a village to raise a child. Boy, all of a sudden, everybody understands that African proverb.
To refute the assertions, the myths, the lies of those who conquered and enslaved and exploited us, or do we build a foundation? Well, I think we're going to have to do perhaps both. We're going to have to build that foundation for which we were standing on, and I think that ASCAC, without question, represents the idea of going back to looking at antiquity while at the same time moving forward as activists. So this idea of going backness, if you want to use that term, is always connected with the future. It's never just the past itself. So we're looking at Fraser's statement, how and in what way did our people try to contend with this problem? And one of the ways was something we call vindicationism. And the idea of vindicationism is how you conduct intellectual warfare with your adversary. And that is trying to dispel the beliefs and assumptions that have been made while at the same time trying to be somebody. So the vindicationist approach has been perhaps maybe 90% of what we call Negro history or Afro-American history, which spends most of its energies trying to convince an unseen white audience or a seen one or one witness of their mistakes in understanding who we are as a people. There's nothing wrong with being a vindicationist. It's just that there's some other things that ought to be done along with it, and that is building the foundation. The foundation represents the message we give to our own people. It is a relationship between this group, that group, those in Brazil, those on the continent or off the continent, how we communicate with each other on our own terms, not trying to prove or disprove anything. Now, I hope you get these two basic ideas that we are trying to champion, because, for lack of a better term, we might need something like a Geiger counter, a kind of a foundational.
But this CSF ventricular system is a fluid-filled system lined by neuromelanin. And people can lack melanin for their skin, but if you don't have melanin in terms of neuromelanin, which is made from a different enzyme, tyrosine hydroxylase, then you weren't even born. You don't. So everybody has that, but there are different levels of neuromelanin along the inner lining of these surfaces. All of the sensory organs have neuromelanin lining, be it the nose, gustatory, olfaction, be it the urogenital system, be it the pulmonary system, be it the gastrointestinal system. Anything that has an epidermis has a neuromelanin lining that helps translate signals as inputs are coming in. But what I'm saying to you that our ancestors, we have been through this kind of game many times before. There have been other catastrophes. There have been other reawakenings. This is probably number 20, at least number 20. So when we read about, it says, what, when you read the pyramid text, it says, it says, and when Heru woke up, he says, well, I'm going before the king, and his name is, his skin is red, and his name is Seth-Typhon. Does that sound familiar to you? Red skin, not physical, but not only physical, but mentality. And when he asked, was my father the king? Didn't he do good works to show everyone how to plant food together and how to survive? He says, what do I have in the way of an inheritance? You know what he told him? You have nothing. You don't even have food stamps. You can't even qualify for SSI. Go to jail. In other words, genocide. What did Heru do? He threw down. I'm suggesting that this is an example of a memory trace that lives in our biology, in our collective unconscious, of what techniques we've used before to survive. It said to snatch the left eye of Heru from the children of the hands of Seth-Typhon, to not ask for it, but to snatch it back. So one last word. Key to all this discussion is this concept of the eye of Heru, the eye of inner vision, genius mentality. So in the resurrection of our people, we are reclaiming genius mentality.
What exactly are we talking about? Because our mind is so dazzled with folklore, and we cannot separate folklore from fact. Too many times we swear by folklore, not knowing that it has nothing to do with facts. Who exactly is a Jew? There was no word called Jew in the ancient world. The word Jew did not come out of Africa. It did not come out of Western Asia. It is a European word. There are people of the Hebrew faith all over the world. There are black Hebrews, there are brown Hebrews, there are yellow Hebrews. How is it that a bunch of Europeans called Jews dominate the word Jew to the extent of making you think that the very faith Hebrew is exclusive to them, leaving out all other people? All right. We become prisoners to circumstances in history. Becoming prisoner to these circumstances in history, we still react to this conquest of the mind. In slavery, we wanted to associate ourselves with the people who had escaped from something. So we read a Jewish escape story called the Exodus. And we believed it. And we didn't examine the story. Because if you examine the story, you will find that the story is told to instill faith in a people. And sometimes, if a story is told to instill faith and truth, the illustration used to get the point across need not be true.
All right.
Tell me, how can 600,000 people cross the Nile, cows, children, goats, sheep, and get on the other side? No laws. The Nile just dried up. It must have been muddy, and they didn't even get their feet muddy. Now you can do it with imagination, but in fact you can't do it. They copied, these Western Asian people copied Nile Valley folk stories, personified themselves into the story, and sold you your own story, and you bought it. Now let's go back and deal with where they copied the story from. There's a 3-volume work published by the University of Chicago on Egyptian literature. I would appreciate it if the people on my right would just let me be heard. Dealing with Egyptian literature. And there is a story in the 3 volumes dealing with a pharaoh who got somewhat despondent, and his magician decided to take him rowing on the Nile. And to make him more happy, the boat was being rowed by beautiful ladies. The lead lady stopped rowing and started crying, and the Pharaoh was very much concerned with what had happened. And he asked the lead lady what had happened. He said she had dropped her necklace in the Nile. And the Pharaoh told the magician to take care of it. At this period in history, all kings or pharaohs travel with a magician. Instead of you and I having a fight, we have a contest between our respective magicians. We didn't take the nation to war. The 2 magicians settled the matter. So this magician parted the water, dried up the Nile, stepped out and picked up the lady's necklace, gave it back, the water came back, she smiled, and they kept rowing the boat over. That's why the Jews copied the story about the part of the water. What I am saying is that at this period in history, there was no such thing as a Jew. There were Western Asian people who later joined the Hebrew faith. There was an extensive series on the history of the Jews. They gave them an artificial history before Babylonia. But they had no clear history before their entry into Africa as visitors seeking food and shelter.